I have the privilege today to introduce Dr. Martin. And Dr. Martin, I was going to figure out how many years you worked for the department, but I didn't get that done. But when you look around trying to find somebody to take on a task and to become the state veterinarian, it's a big deal. And Dr. Martin was eager to take on that role. Dr. Mekas had done big shoes to fill, and I can tell you he filled them real quick. And with AI, Dr. Martin's specialty was poultry, and the things that he'd done, there's no training for it. He had never been to state vet before he took that job. But all of his training, just like I tell people, so, well, they've never done that. And I said, well, I was never chief of staff. Commissioner of Agriculture, when he took that job, he had never done that. And that's kind of how this is. But this job is complicated, and it's so important. And the thing that can give comfort to you farmers is that our objective is not to just take care of the disease, but get those farmers back in business, whatever the disaster or the disease is. And so Dr. Martin is going to talk a little bit about himself, who he is and what he's done. He probably won't tell you that he's a great chef. And me and him has cooked several meals together, one real important meal. You might want to talk a little bit about that. But I'm delighted, and thank you for allowing me to introduce him. So Dr. Martin.
Yeah, Zane and I actually cooked the very first alpha-gal free pork meal in the world. And it was an honor and an experience. So yeah, I have a pleasure working with him in a cooking capacity as well. But thank you so much. It's an honor to be here this morning. I really appreciate you guys' time. And do want to kind of get into, I was asked to give a little bit of a background on me, so maybe you get to know me a little bit more. I am planning on floating around to the policy rooms and trying to make myself available here and there. So anytime you see me, if you've got questions for me or anything, I'm happy to stay and answer them for you. And again, it's a pleasure and an honor to be here. As far as me, where I came from originally, because most of you may know that I have lack of a southern accent. I come originally from Central Valley, California, and dairy country out there. A lot of people that meet me when they go, oh, you're from California, where crazy people are. And I go like, oh yeah, but at least I'm not a damn Yankee. So that's all good. But I grew up in Central Valley, California, mostly dairies. There was some contract broiler farms. My best friend in high school's parents owned a contract broiler farm from Foster Farms. And I would work there for money throughout the year, just a little bit here and there. And the one thing I knew when I went away to college is I never wanted to do poultry ever again. And you can see where that got me. I went into veterinary school trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And that was at the advice of my poultry advisor. I was floating around back and forth through zoology and poultry. And once, I want to make sure my slides are moving all right. Once I got into veterinary school, I knew I wanted to do population medicine. I wasn't sure if I wanted to do animal production population medicine or other types of populations. And very shortly, it became aware that I felt like I could do more within animal agriculture than I could otherwise. And also the people were just so much nicer, to be honest. It was a really pleasant group of people to be around. So that's the direction that I went. After veterinary school, I went and did my residency in poultry medicine. My first job out of school was working for a company here in North Carolina called Embrex. And I did research and development in vaccines to support their machine that did in ovo or in-egg injections of vaccines. After that, I went to Southern Illinois University in Carbondale for a couple of years. And I'm going the wrong way here. Make sure, sorry, I can't see the screens as easily. Went to Southern Illinois University in Carbondale, where I went to taught for a couple years, and then had the great pleasure and experience of going into the veterinary school at NC State in their poultry faculty. And there I was the lead instructor for clinical poultry medicine, going out to a lot of farms, also the charge of the residency program out there. Dr. Mason, who some of you may know, retired as the director of poultry health programs back in 2016. And I quickly and eagerly applied for the position with the Department of Ag. I'd gotten to know a lot of the people in the Department of Ag and the veterinary division over the years, and it was always a great experience, and I felt like their mission was really, really strong, really sound. And so I was privileged to come on in that capacity, and then again in this last year as state veterinarian for the North Carolina Department of Agriculture. So let me go in a little bit about just where we are as far as a state and the importance of agriculture. Many of you know that agriculture is the #1 commodity in the state of North Carolina. And you can see on this slide, which I can't see, a lot of where we rank top in. And one of the things that you'll notice at the very top ranking is #1 cash receipts in the country over every other state in the nation for poultry and poultry products. So not only do we have a really, really strong ag industry in general, both on the crop side and the animal side, but very strong on the poultry side as well. This pie chart shows that on average we generate a little bit over $10 billion a year in agriculture for cash receipts. About 66% of that is from animal agriculture, with around about 42% or so, or 4.2 billion if I remember right, for poultry, and about 1.9 billion or so for swine. So again, a lot of animal agriculture. It's really important to the state in a very high agriculture state as well. Some of the other things where we rank high at, you'll see that in turkeys, we rank second in the nation. Usually we're second or third, always behind Minnesota. If I remember the order of my slides yet, this is going to be the broiler slide. I think we rank typically, I want to make sure where we're at here. Well, we rank 4th in broilers. We always rank 4th in broilers, and when we get to egg layers, we're always around 8 to 12. Right now, we're ranked 9th in the nation for our egg laying production facilities. And then on swine, depending on the parameters that you're looking at, we're always going to rank about 2nd or 3rd in swine, whether you're looking at overall, like your annual hog numbers or your actual baby piglets that are coming into production. So again, very strong agriculture, straight across the board on the animal side. The next slide that I'm going to show you is going to be a little bit of one of the kind of, I guess, Cadillac things that we have at the Department of Ag, which is our new Commissioner Stephen Troxler Agricultural Science Center, of which the Rollins Diagnostic Lab is one of 5 labs that are part of that. And this is something that is a bit of a labor of love, and you'll see a video that's going to be playing in the corner, as well as some images during the construction. This started out on a plot of land that was owned by the state, and it was originally dedicated and allocated towards the dairy labs that were conducted over at the veterinary school at NC State. And so they went and kind of raised the earth and tried to get everything suitable for construction, and you'll see that construction develop over time in these images. Some of these images are real images of the construction site, some of our rendering of that, and the video is just an animated rendering of what that facility was supposed to look close to the beginning, and you'll see that as it grew, it definitely met what we expected and beyond. One of the things that you'll notice as it goes through is the way that it's lit, and so a lot of our old lab facilities were dark, and it was kind of depressing to work in, to be fair, especially the Rollins lab, which was a little bit of a dungeon if any of you had been in there before. And so what you'll see with kind of all the glass siding around this is a very well-lit space for our people, very pleasant to visit. If any of you have not had a chance to visit it, it's right over on the corner of Edward Mills Run and Reedy Creek. I highly recommend you go and see that facility. The laboratory space is on the north side of the building, and it's almost all natural light coming in. It's just basically a wall of windows, and so it's really, really very a pleasant space to kind of work in and be in. And you'll see part of all the things that are going here is we have a state-of-the-art necropsy and diagnostic facility for the Rollins laboratory. And even an area where there's like a viewing room that people can go into to view the necropsy space for teaching and training of students, where we can hook up cameras and microphones so they can actually see what's going on inside. So a great facility, a wonderful facility. I highly encourage you guys to make use of it and take a look at it. So I'll go next into diseases, and the disease that is the biggest one of concern recently has been avian influenza. And this is a disease that's been with us for quite a while. Lots of years we've had outbreaks and concerns. We've had a lot more than we normally would expect recently. So it seems like avian influenza is getting to be more and more of a kind of a standard and maybe just endemic to some extent in our country. But we're kind of keeping an eye on things. One of the things I'll say is that, when you're looking at avian influenza, the usual initial route of transmission into our commercial production facilities is from wild bird contact, whether it be commercial or backyard dependent. These wild migratory birds carrying the virus and exposing our domesticated birds. And if we're looking at differentiating between low-path AI that you might hear in the news and high-path AI in the news, the very simplest way of looking at it is that low path just kills less birds and high path kills more birds. So typically 75% or more mortality is going to be associated with a high path virus. In 2020, we experienced a break in North Carolina that happened during the pandemic, and so it didn't really get a lot of news or attention. It involved a total of 13 commercial farms, 11 of which were in North Carolina, the other 2 in South Carolina. It started out as a low-path event, and then the very last farm in South Carolina ended up turning to a high path. And so this virus mutates really well, and it can easily shift from low path to high path, which makes it troubling even if it's just a low path or if it's a high path. This is just a map to show you kind of where that occurred. It occurred in Union and Anson counties for us. And it was something that we contained really relatively well with good collaboration with the industry and also our federal partners. The 2022 outbreak that we are currently experiencing is a bit more troublesome. And where this story actually starts is back in 2014, 2015, with migratory birds bringing mostly to the west of us the virus. And it affected and ended up the population of over 50 million birds during that 2015 outbreak. It was a Eurasian strain of virus. And that virus kind of migrated away and went away back to Eurasia. And then there was some activity that was brewing up in Eurasia that caused it to end up kind of going across flyways and coming back to the United States. We had our first positive case in wild birds in South Carolina in January 13th, 2022. Our first case in North Carolina was January 16th, 2022, so we weren't that far behind. And although we started seeing it pop nationally, we kind of kept it at bay. We had a lot of outreach to the industry. We were doing town hall meetings with growers. We were doing tabletop exercises with the companies, trying to keep this at bay. And then we did end up getting a positive eventually in North Carolina that I'll talk about here in a minute. Right now, where we're at, we're still getting positive cases, which is highly unusual for this virus being this far into summertime. But it is still happening, showing that this virus, even though we like to try to predict it, it is still really unpredictable. But it has affected most of the states in the country. It has led to the depopulation of just over 40 million birds countrywide. They're still getting trickles of positive cases in Utah and Washington as we speak. But you can see here, this is the curve as far as number of new cases per week. We are on the downside. Where we got hit in North Carolina is right at the height of this peak, right at the end of March and beginning of April. And then this map is similar to the same map that I had before, but it's just showing the last date of when the last positive farm was. And it's kind of color coded so that you can see if it's a bluer color or greener color, it's more recent or more distant ago that our last farm was. Our last farm positive was on April 11th in North Carolina, but you can see we're still getting positive farms up in Utah, Washington, Oregon. Those states are still continuing to have some issues even to this day. In North Carolina, we ended up losing about 500,000 birds over 9 commercial farms, 6 of those being turkey farms and 3 of those being broiler farms. We have just recently undergone the end of virus elimination on our last house, on our last farm, which basically means we have to take care of all the dead animals, dispose of them properly. We composted all these animals associated with this outbreak. All the animals that were depopulated were using foam depopulation. Both of those are procedures that we believe in North Carolina is the best way to go. If at all possible, we can go that route. So we were very pleased with our ability to depopulate these animals quickly, effectively, humanely, and also dispose them in a way that really facilitated a positive element to public health and environmental impact. This outbreak, even though it ran the course of 9 farms, was something that really kind of hit us in one big smack. It was deemed, based upon genetic sequencing of the virus, that we had what was called a point source of disease. That means it hit and it went to all these 9 farms, all basically the same time, and then it stopped. We ended up stopping it in its tracks. So even though it took several days for the last farm to break, that was all incubation period for the bug. It wasn't that we were getting farm to farm to farm spread. And the way we know this, and this may look like just a bunch of pretty colors at first, but when you're looking at the genetic sequencing and you have all the colors that are showing how identical they are, what you see here is you don't see a stair-step pattern. You don't see a lot of mutations for new genes, and then that passed to the next farm, and that passed to the next farm. What you're seeing is all the same genetic sequence for every single farm, and then little mutations that are occurring after that. So we really do feel within a day or so, all 9 farms were positive. So by the time we had our first quarantine up, it was destined that all 9 of those farms were going to be positive at that time. We just didn't know it yet. But we were really proud of our field staff working on that veterinary division emergency programs, working collaboratively with industry. Industry did just a top-notch job stepping up to the table, providing resources and support to us as we provided it to them. And in that collaborative work and working with our USDA partners, we were able to contain this and stop it in its tracks, which is better than some states where it continued to spread and be a problem. There's a few other diseases that are really important that I wanted to cover today, because it isn't just avian influenza, even though it seems like that most of the time. African swine fever is a disease of great clinical significance and importance. I remember when I was in veterinary school, I learned about this as this nasty, horrible pig disease, kills pigs dead, and it doesn't exist in the United States, and we're gonna do everything possible to keep it out. And here we are decades later, and you know what? It's a nasty, horrible disease. It kills pigs dead, and we really want to keep it out of the United States. So some things haven't changed, but there's a big globalization that has occurred since the time when I was in veterinary school to now. And although we've had this disease in the Dominican Republic before, we haven't had it, I think, in this globalized market. So in 1978, we had African swine fever in there. USDA was able to come in and help facilitating depopulation of all those pigs, including feral pigs on the island of Dominican Republic and Haiti, and then just left. And honestly, there was some element of it where the economics of the country, since they have such a reliance on swine populations, their domestic swine populations, it really left a big hole. And it also left somewhat, in some sectors, a bad taste in the Dominican Republic's mouth. So add on to that, globalization now spread to the Dominican Republic, where it's run pretty much rampantly now throughout the country, and also in Haiti, and then consider the civil unrest in Haiti, and what's happened recently as far as natural disasters there. To be able to control this disease is a monumental challenge. Now, USDA has dedicated lots of staff and resources to that challenge, but we got to be realistic. It is a massive challenge. So we have to prepare for it in the United States. Puerto Rico is now kind of a point of protection. It's kind of like separate from the United States in the World Health Organization's eyes, so we can add it as a buffer in case it gets positive. But if it gets into the contiguous United States, it's going to be definitively problematic. So we've been doing lots of planning, and some of that planning includes our feral swine program. So we have a feral swine program. You can see up there that feral swine are not just important from the standpoint of a disease, but for all of your crops as well, because they can cause significant damage to crops and natural habitats. So it's a massive problem that we have some federal funding. Right now, North Carolina is in the spotlight because of this program. It's a relatively unique program that we're trying to start up. Dr. Broadaway, who might be here somewhere in the audience that I know is running your specialty livestock working group, had been a major part of that getting started up within the Department of Ag as well. So we're really positive and optimistic about that program and actually the challenges that it faces. Another challenge that we have is chronic wasting disease, a disease that previously had not existed in North Carolina but had existed in the U.S. We got our first positive that was identified back from a hunter-harvested sample in 2021, but when they take these samples, they pull them up and sometimes run a month later, so we didn't actually get the official diagnosis until March of 2022. But that means that this disease is probably in our wild deer population and there to stay. And so we've been working really closely with our partners at the North Carolina Wildlife Resource Commission to plan and strategize not only for our farmed cervid populations, but for those wild deer populations as well. And our hopes is that we end up trying to contain it as best as we can, because you can see on the national level on this slide, when it starts to spread in an area, it can spread pretty quickly. And although there's not concretely a human health issue associated with this, there's always the potential based upon this particular type of disease and the pathogen that it is, that it could be a human health issue. So we take this very seriously and we monitor this disease very seriously. Another foreign animal disease that's banging at our back door right now is rabbit hemorrhagic disease virus. This is a disease that should not be here in the United States and then became endemic in all those red states on the western part of the country, you see, causing a hemorrhagic mortality syndrome in rabbits. So we got now almost half of our country that is considered endemic from it because it's in wild populations. And those other states, including our neighbors in Georgia, Kentucky, and Tennessee, have had domestic rabbit cases that have popped positive. So we've been looking really carefully at a newly developed vaccines and rolling that out to private practitioners here in the state, trying to determine that vaccine is efficacious or not, but also just watching all of our rabbit populations in the state to try to make sure we don't have issues with this disease as well. And the other big thing that we work with is natural disasters. So we now have the 7th year in a row that we are supposed to have an above average hurricane season. I don't know how many years in a row you get where you have an above average something before you go, hey, maybe we need to refigure out the average, right? And this particular storm season seems to be very personal towards me because Martin is one of the pre-named storms coming up. And I'm really not looking forward to that one, to be honest with you. But we do try to work with the industry, try to provide support. As Zane had mentioned, we want to be there to help get farmers back on their feet as well as deal with the immediacy of the issue. And if you look at Hurricane Florence, that was a really devastating disaster that we did exactly that. We worked with FEMA, we got resources in to be able to deal with the mortality associated with that flooding, depopulate farms that couldn't get to the birds, that couldn't provide food and water. We lost, I think, 4.17 million birds to that storm, Hurricane Florence, and about 5,500 hogs. So it was a really, really devastating disease, and it caused massive damage on farms, not just from flooding, but spontaneous tornadoes would pop up and damage farms like you see here. And just remember, if some of you didn't, maybe some of you didn't live it as closely as we did, this was a hurricane that turned the city of Wilmington into an island. That bottom left picture, I think it was the bottom left, yeah, is I-40, and it just basically is completely gone. In the top right is a neighborhood. When I was in a helicopter, we were looking at poultry farms and trying to assess what the damage is there. That was a neighborhood where that lake behind that neighborhood is all just a giant golf course, or was. And the people were just yanking. You can see maybe little strips of piles of garbage that people were yanking stuff out of their house just to get disposed of. So massive amounts of damage. And whenever you have anything that's big, it's not unlikely that animal populations are going to be negatively impacted as well. So for me, this is kind of I got this magnet actually up on my fridge to help kind of keep me go through the day. I kind of empathize with the cat here because I do feel like, especially in the veterinary division, you never know what's going to come down the street next. And so we do feel like we have to be prepared for anything. And that's what makes venues like this really great for us, is because then my ability to engage with you guys can help me understand what the next issues are, what the ones that I'm not keeping an eye on. Because there's a lot of things that happen that I never expected that I would get involved with in this job, whether it be tracking down whether or not tigers or polar bears had COVID or not, whether or not somebody's personal macaque, which why would they own a macaque in the first place, but had monkeypox or not. We had a situation with an alligator farm that's starting up, but they have poultry that they want to feed to alligator farms, so we're tied up regulatory-wise in that. And then honeybee vaccination. There's a novel vaccination that's going to be rolling out hopefully soon for American foul brood for honeybees, and we would be permitting that if that came to fruition. So there's all these really interesting things that are out there that basically I've always felt like, if any of you seen the Matrix movies, where they plug the person into the table and they learn how to fly a helicopter. Yeah, that's me every day. So it's always an adventure, always really interesting, and it is exciting to be a part of it. So this is the idea of hoping for the best, preparing for the worst, don't be surprised by anything else that you see, is something that I would encourage people to kind of take to heart to some extent. And for me, my message to you is that these disease events, whether it's crop disease or an animal agriculture disease, whether it's a natural disaster, they're going to happen at some point in time. So I would encourage everybody to be planning for it. Make a plan. Practice that plan if you possibly can. Review that plan on a regular basis. And then make changes to that plan as it seems appropriate. And then rinse and repeat. It's just got to keep going. And hopefully, again, nothing will ever happen. You'll never need that plan. But if you have those plans in place for whatever you think might be coming down the path that'll affect your crop or your animal agriculture sectors, then you're that much further along, and we can get through to the end even faster. And I'll leave you on this slide. For me, one of my favorite things to do at the Department of Ag is to attend the Mountain State Fair. Now, most of you may be very familiar with the State Fair, and it's great, it's wonderful, but the Mountain State Fair is something that's extraordinarily, it's just wonderful experience. And I had the opportunity this last year to drag my boys up there. They went kicking and screaming at first, but they loved it once they were there. And this is one of my best memories of it, because it's not just me and the boys up there and working the Mountain State Fair, which is a great venue, but it's also, that is over by the swimming pool where they have a fire pit, and that's where all of my field staff would go at the end of a day. They'd work a long, hard day, and they'd go down there by the fire pit. And sometimes they had somebody bring a guitar, sometimes people would sing, but we all got together at the end of the long day working for the state of North Carolina as a family and celebrated that hard work at the end of the day. And to me, that's why I'm honored to be the director of the veterinary division. That's why I'm honored to work with those hardworking people that work for me and for the department every day. And that's why also I'm honored to be here speaking to you today, because most of you didn't have to be here. Most of you are here voluntarily. And why are you here? You're here because you want to make your farm better and the farms in the state better. And you don't have to do that. So thank you for honoring me to be here today, and I really hope you have an incredibly productive session.